Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room. It's a BC-based show that tries to extend its reach around the world for all sorts of issues. I'm Robin Adair, and not reaching that far, just across town is my co-host with the most, the Croatian sensation John Jurisic. And John, off the top, once again, it seems that our Prime Minister is in the muck.
Robin, I've been a supporter of Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberals last couple of elections. He's making it very difficult for folks like me to think about voting for them again. They're stumbling around all sorts of things, ethics-related things, some things that are very obviously wrong. First, there are questions about money from Beijing being directed to Liberal candidates. Now there's all of this mess around the Trudeau Foundation.
Yeah, well, the Trudeau Foundation just seems to be the latest big thing to really dig our heels in when it comes to the Prime Minister. He's supposed to be at arm's length from the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation, which does good works apparently, and a major donor, and apparently a family friend of the Trudeaus for over 50 years, has decided to lay out, and has already done this, laid out a major holiday, a Jamaican retreat, and that's all fine. They're trying to find out how much the Prime Minister paid to do this. Speculation is he didn't pay a thing. And on top of that, we taxpayers got to pay for all the protection, all the security that went into this holiday for our Prime Minister and his family. And, he got eviscerated for doing this earlier with the Aga Khan. And it was a big deal at that time. It seems to me Mr. Trudeau really needs to change the narrative. It's time for him to stop stumbling on this stuff and move on to the issues that Canadians want to talk about, like catch and release, our energy, our economy. And here we are again in his private matters not being well handled.
Robin, I've come to the conclusion personally that I'm not sure that he'll have that ability to move out of this. At some point, you can make the same mistake only a few or three times before it's clearly intentional. We had former Conservative MP John Reynolds on the show, and he was less concerned about Beijing interference in our election process. But boy, was he ever unhappy with this government. And rightly so, it appears. One of our viewers, Christine, wrote in reaction to Reynolds' comments, and our show, propaganda bull, just like mainstream media.
Well, Christine, I think you're certainly entitled to your opinion, and we do attempt to show a wide cross-section of opinion, and we don't always agree with our guests. Heck, we had NDP Tourism Minister Lana Popham on the show not too long ago, and I campaigned against Lana Popham in a very tightly held race back in 2009 and lost to her, but I'm not bitter. I had her on the show because I wanted to find out what she had to say. You don't have to agree with everything these people say, but you should get points of view across.
Yeah, absolutely. And boy, did we get feedback about our show's deep criticism of Donald Trump. I'm telling you, that was the most personal commentary on you and I that I've ever read on our show. Whew, there's some folks that just do not like me. Let's face it, we're not alone in disliking the Donald. Ron wrote a pointy comment about our show. Robin Adair was at one time very fair in his reporting, but obviously they only have left-leaning guests and views.
Well, Ron, all I can say to that again is we have people from the right, we have people from the left, we have all sorts of different opinions on this program, and John and I both share different views and some similar views. We're out of the business community, so we have commonality, but there's 1,000 different points of view, and we're trying to, I sound like Bush Sr., 1,000 points of light, but I think it's important that we really hear from as many diverse people as we can, and we do appreciate getting this feedback, and we love getting feedback from all sorts of perspectives, including Sheila Orr.
Boy, is it fun hearing from Sheila Orr, who never holds back on her opinions. We asked her about the upcoming royal coronation, big deal in Britain, Prince Harry is going to London, but apparently Meghan Markle is staying in California. Maybe to avoid being booed?
You have to wonder, John. You have to wonder. It's funny, we have kind of a curious attachment to this couple because for a very brief time, about 3 months, they resided right here on Vancouver Island. And sort of some talk that maybe they'd stay and he'd become the official Prince of Canada. Canadian government didn't want to pay for all that security, so they flew away. And his short stay gave him the unofficial and maybe not enviable title of Prince of Canada on the South Park cartoon show. And well, we just had to ask Sheila to comment on the strategies employed by Harry and Meghan, starting with their brief fling as Canadian royals.
So I think they were sitting out in Saanich and were refused the entry to one of the best restaurants out there. And I think they were sitting there saying, well, we're living in Saanich. We're certainly not going to make any money here. There's nothing to be had here for sure. There's nobody going to be interested in us. So we'll do our 3 months, which is what they did in a house, as we know, that was sort of given to them through David Foster. I don't know if it's given or whether it was paid for. I don't know that. But and then I think they thought, oh, no, this is not going to work. We're not going to make any money here. Do you know any Kardashians out in Saanich? Yes, the Prince of Canada, hardly. I mean, right now, what is he? The rumors from England, the grumblings over there is that they're going to separate. Yeah, that he is going to finally come to his senses and he's going to want his life back because he had a good life. He had a huge network of friends. He was busy. And now look at him. What does he do? I know he plays a bit of polo. I get that. But seriously?
Always love hearing from Sheila. The coronation taking place on May the 6th. It'll be an overnight affair. You have to get your coffee and you have to sit patiently and watch through the night if you want to see it live. And I know that a lot of people will be glued to their TV sets, including a fair number of people, I understand, at the Union Club of British Columbia, as they'll be there overnight. And then they're even having a coronation breakfast the next morning. So good on them. And, maybe Meghan Markle will show up. Maybe she'll even come to the Union Club and watch it with everybody. You never know. Anyway, John, we're going to shift topics now, and we're going to move on to a warmer topic. Let's talk about Mexico.
Oh, that's great. I wish that we had a camera in the Union Club for that overnight affair. That's going to be a lot of fun. Robin, yes, let's talk about Mexico. You and I have both traveled to Mexico this past winter, as have thousands and thousands of Canadians. It's clearly, if not already, becoming the #1 hot spot and travel destination for Canadians. But we thought we'd find out more about the best options for a Mexican holiday, an all-inclusive, condos, rentals, maybe even buying a property.
And we have, I believe, a very good person to discuss this. Chris Bouchard is a real estate agent, works for Remax out of Bucerias, Mexico. That's out on the West Coast and fairly close to Puerto Vallarta. He and his wife, Cindy, also own and operate a boutique hotel in La Cruz called Villa Amor del Mar. And Cindy is a Victoria girl. And it's kind of cool. There's a Victoria link. They met on Vancouver Island. They fell in love. And then they decided they're going to move to Mexico. And they've been down there for quite some time. They've made it their home base. So I thought, let's find out from a Canadian a few things about how to approach a trip to Mexico, where to stay, what to invest in, what to avoid. Let's just zoom him in. Now, joining us for the first time in the Rumble Room is Chris Bouchard, all the way from La Cruz, Mexico. And Chris, just super to have you on the program.
Oh, it's great fun. I'm ready to rumble, gentlemen.
That's the attitude we
Be
love.
gentle with me.
That's the attitude we love.
Please be gentle. This is my first rumble in a while.
Well, we'll see what we can do to give you another rumble here. But the questions should just, I think, be informative for a lot of Canadians. And let's face it, a lot of people from our side of the border are traveling to Mexico. Increasingly, it's becoming one of the places for people in Canada, and BC in a big way are heading south for the winter months. Great climates, wonderful places to visit and explore. And so, Chris, right away,
For your average Canadian, your average British Columbian looking for a place to land, uh, what's the best sort of thing for dipping the water or getting a taste for Mexico? Is it an all-inclusive? Is it a small hotel? Is it a rental? I mean, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I would say if you've never been to Mexico before, all inclusives are great because you know what you're going to spend. Usually they include everything. They pick you up at the airport. You might have to spend more time waiting for everybody else to get on the bus and things like that. Although there are some very high-end custom all-inclusives as well. Um, you're not going to see too much of the well, you'll see some of the culture because many of these all-inclusive do feature some interesting performances, folkloric dancers and Cirque du Soleil type events and so on. So you will see some of the Mexican culture, but you'll see it in a nicely packaged manner. So that's certainly one way to go, particularly if you've got a large family and you want a finite budget, have it all paid before you get there. That's one good way to go. Depending if you consider yourself a tourist or a traveler or an adventurer or an explorer, certainly we have a lot of people come here. They sail down. They'll sail all the way down from Victoria and Seattle, and we have many sailboats anchored offshore, just about 100 yards from our place here, and there are people who are more going to take on the adventure. So it really kind of depends where you land in the spectrum of first time tourist, big family, or seasoned veteran travelers like yourselves, maybe that have been to different parts of the world, have some I'll call it traveler smarts as opposed to just being a wide-eyed tourist that might get off track or really it's a product of what kind of traveler you are. Certainly there's some great hotels in the traditional sense, and then many Airbnbs, or like our place, more of a boutique inn where you have the proprietors are very actively involved in making sure you're taken care of, and often places such as ours, or boutique inns, they're really keen to boost their neighborhood. They live in the town that they're not just down for the winter. The most of them live here year round. In our case, we're about 9 months. So again, depending on the kind of experience you think you want to have, I would always probably just as I would probably defer to easy for the first time you come somewhere. So maybe it's an all-inclusive at first, and then but poke your head out and look around a bit.
That's fabulous advice. I've been to Mexico about half a dozen times, always in an inclusive. I've always poked my head out and looked.
Yeah.
Great advice. Hey, I've heard a ton of great things about La Cruz, which is where you operate your hotel,
Right,
and other businesses. It sounds like you live in a very accessible and safe area just north of Puerto Vallarta. Could you perhaps talk, please, about the merits and drawbacks of different regions of Mexico for tourists? Okay. In other words, is Cancun and the Yucatan any different from your area or places like Cabo or Acapulco?
Okay, so great question. I can't speak with much authority on Cancun and the east side of the sort of Yucatan Peninsula very much. I just haven't been there. Like any tourist area, there's going to be attractives and detractives, if you will. For example, right now, my heart goes out to the people on the East Coast because they're dealing with this darn Sargasso giant seaweed invasion. You might have heard about that.
Yeah.
That's seasonal. But I can speak with more authority on a couple of coastal places that I've been to. So the Puerto Vallarta area certainly is one of the fastest growing and biggest destinations for not just tourists but expats that want to live a kind of a half life or a snowbird type of life. Been to San Lucas, pardon me, and San Jose del Cabo. That seems to be more of I think percentage wise, there's more Americans there. It's a straight shot from LA down the coast, or down the peninsula rather, to Cabo. There's lots of really interesting inland places to go as well. But certainly Puerto Vallarta, I was just reading, we had 6.2 million visitors through the airport this year. We're back and beyond pre-COVID. So, lots of growth, and it's a big part of the Mexican focus on their economy to make for a quality, safe vacation for travelers from all over the world.
But you do hear
Yeah.
about people going to places like Oaxaca or down to Zihuatanejo
Oaxaca
and
is a great
Ixtapa. I
city.
mean,
Yeah, Oaxaca is an inland Oaxaca, kind of like New York, New York. There's a few of those here in Mexico. Oaxaca is kind of the main hub of. It's either mezcal. I think it's mezcal, and not there's three main tequila type drinks, and beautiful history. There's a lot, there's lots of 500-600-year-old colonial towns in Mexico. I mean, Guadalajara, which will soon be about a 3-hour drive from La Cruz. And I really recommend that as an excursion for those that have been to Vallarta, Puerto Vallarta a number of times. That's a 600-year-old, well, and beyond, obviously pre-Hispanic, but many great places to discover. But yeah, again, you asked, John, about tourists. As tourists, I would always recommend a major tourist destination, and also use guide.
so it's a better time. You get the sense to go to Mexico than it's ever been. You don't hear as much about Montezuma's revenge. People
Correct.
are still careful about
Yeah.
drinking the water in a lot of places, but
Yeah.
we still do hear serious things about cartels. We hear about shootings. They had them up
Sure.
in Mazatlan not too long ago.
Absolutely.
And my
Yeah.
question about that is, should tourists be worried about crime, or are there just precautions you take so you stay out of the way?
Well, glad you brought that up, because it's an important factor, and certainly kind of back to my, you can get some advice on what to do and what not to do. The Canadian government will tell you. Actually, I was looking up this morning about, okay, what if forget about going to Mexico. What if I'm going to the USA? And they will say, well, stay away from the border states, or the border states and the border crossing towns with border crossings are more likely to have commercial activity, shall we say, which can include everything from illicit drugs to, everything that comes with that. I feel absolutely safe having friends and family come to Puerto Vallarta. But if they say, well, we're staying in this area, what's this like? And I go, well, it's like this. It's a super, if you want to party hard, it's a super party place. But more things happen after midnight that are risky than during the day. So it's really just. I'm sure there's places on the island where you would or would not be comfortable to know your loved ones were walking around at night. But
Yeah,
in
that's
general, like I mentioned, 6.2 million people traveled through Vallarta this year, and I can't think of anybody that I know of that had any kind of problems. My wife Cindy has this phrase: when you're in Mexico, look up, look down, look all around. And
This is a great intro for my next question, Chris.
yeah,
So you and your wife, Cindy, as you've just indicated, who I understand is raised a Victoria-based person. Is that right?
that's correct. Well, she's a
Uh,
Victoria gal. We met at a young entrepreneurs annual family picnic out on Old West Saanich Road there at
Oh
a
my gosh. Okay,
friend's
so the
hobby farm.
both of you own and operate the Villa Armoire. Okay, let me say this again. The Villa Armoire del Mar in La Cruz. Is that
Villa
correct?
Amor del Mar, or as we say in Spanish, Villa Amor del Mar.
Oh, that's
Sounds
fantastic.
a little bit more expensive with the accent, but
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
it's we came.
So
I
that's
guess I should let you finish your question, but
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So that's obviously a nice introduction to the country. Fantastic. Thank you for rephrasing it. It sounds so much more romantic.
yeah,
However, some people do want more,
yes,
like ownership of a condo, even a house.
yep,
Maybe that kind of client. And I can tell you from the all-inclusives, they are just laden with timeshares. I mean, you got to
yes,
fight your way through this. So could
yes.
you walk us through the pluses and minuses of all of this, the merits of staying or buying, a hotel, a place in a hotel or a
Right.
resort, or opting instead for property ownership?
Okay, so I will confess not a lot of personal experience with timeshare, but I understand it reasonably well enough. I think I could probably corroborate some of what you think about it and maybe add some to the mix. Many timeshare. Well, first of all, I don't put timeshare in the same category as deeded real estate. There's 2 or 3 ways to have a place in Mexico. But so timeshare is more of a contract with the right of a week or 2 weeks in a particular resort or in a bunch of resorts. So, for example, I think Wyndham is maybe an example. I mean, I've heard good and bad about all of it, right? Certainly, their sales process is extremely polished, and you might say relentless. But one thing I do know to the credit of that industry is that, and please verify this if you're thinking about buying a timeshare, is understand if you have buyer's remorse, you have a period of time by which you can get out of it. Anybody coming to Vallarta, I would say, a good plan would be if you've never been here before or none of your group have been here before, go somewhere kind of central, kind of in the middle of the pack where you can get out to other places, but get a sense of even just adjusting to the weather and the activity, and so that can take a little bit of time.
So then you move towards something where people say, I want to buy an apartment. I want to live there maybe half the year.
Right.
I really live in Mexico, buy furniture.
Yeah.
How complicated is that? I understand you can't actually own the property.
You own the property, but you own it through a trust. So it's kind of like, it's the document is called a fideicomiso. So it's a trust. And the number one thing I would recommend above all else is when you deal with an agent, ask them to show you their AMPI certification, AMPI, which is Mexican for NAR, National Association of Realtors in the States. We're affiliated with the Canadian Real Estate Association. That's the number one smartest thing you can do if you think you're going to buy some property. Like anywhere, we learned it all in kindergarten, how to behave somewhere new, I think, Rob, and you've heard this expression from me before. If you think the weather's warm here, wait till you meet the people. And I think anybody that's traveled here can echo that.
Robin, listening to Chris makes me want to go on another Mexican holiday. Such a life adventure. Fascinating. But with the weather getting a little bit better at home, hopefully, had a bit too much rain, I think. It's also time to take more holidays right in our own backyard. We live in really such a beautiful part of the world.
It's true, John, and I have to say I've just backed myself from another little getaway to go to New York for a weekend where it was 92 degrees and humid. So, we don't have a monopoly on great weather, but we're looking forward to things getting much warmer and happier out here on the West Coast. And we are also looking for a happier outcome in the situation in Ukraine. That Russian invasion was a year ago. The battle still rages. So many people are suffering and dying. So many Ukrainians are living in Canada right now to sit the battle out and hopefully get to return home again soon. So, we're looking forward to hearing more about maybe a forecast on what's happening there and what still needs to happen in order for that to get settled, or if it can be settled. And a favorite of ours is going to be in to discuss this. Former Lieutenant Colonel Chris Kilford will be back on the Rumble Room next week, and he's going to talk about, what we need to do as Canadians to support the Ukrainians and what Ukraine perhaps needs to do to end this war. So looking forward to that discussion.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to chatting with Chris and hearing about what's going on over there and possible spring offensive if it's already going on. Can't wait for that interview. But now, time again to remind our many viewers, and there are many, how they can follow
How
our
many,
show.
John? How many viewers so far? How many viewers?
Well, so far, we've had over 900,000 cumulative views of the Rumble Room over the past 2 years, Robin. And I calculate that number on a monthly basis. We could be getting close to 1 million, and I think we should start to, warn.
Gear up for that.
Yeah, we're going to have a bit of excitement celebrating hitting 1 million views. Nonetheless, let's just talk about how you can view our interviews and our shows. Certainly, Facebook is our core platform, and we also put our links on Twitter, and we are on YouTube. All close to 300 of our interviews. We also engage with Facebook news groups, numerous of them. We are involved with Instagram and also TikTok. Okay, so please consider subscribing and liking our interviews on YouTube and all of the other platforms that I've just explained. What a great show this week, Robin. Again, I'm so glad you're back from New York. That's so great. And I'm looking for more of the same next week. Great speakers. For now, I remain your creation sensation, John Jurisic.
You are sensational, John, and so are our many viewers. And with that said, I'm Robin Adair, and rumble on.